Chapter 3. Mr. Harrison at Home. Mr. Harrison's house was old-fashioned, low-eaved, whitewashed structure set against a thick spruce grove. Mr. Harrison himself was sitting on his vine-shaded veranda in his shirt sleeves, enjoying his evening pipe. When he realized who was coming up the path, he sprang suddenly to his feet, bolted into the house, and shut the door. This was merely the uncomfortable result of his surprise, mingled with a good deal of shame over his outburst of temper the day before, but it nearly swept the remnant of her courage from Anne's heart. If he's so cross now, what will he be when he hears what I've done? She reflected miserably as she rapped at the door. But Mr. Harrison opened it, smiling sheepishly, and invited her to enter in a tone quite mild and friendly, if somewhat nervous. He had laid aside his pipe and donned his coat. He offered Anne a very dusty chair very politely, and her reception would have passed off pleasantly enough if it had not been for the telltale of a parrot who was peering through the bars of his cage with wicked golden eyes. No sooner had Anne seated herself than Ginger exclaimed, "Bless my soul, what's that red-headed snippet coming here for?" It would be hard to say whose face was redder, Mr. Harrison's or Anne's. Don't you mind that parrot," said Mr. Harrison, casting a furious glance at Ginger. He's always talking nonsense. I got him from my brother, who was a sailor. Sailors don't always use the choicest language, and parrots are very imitative birds. So I should think, said poor Anne, the remembrance of her errand quelling her resentment. She couldn't afford to snub Mr. Harrison under the circumstances, that was certain. When you had just sold a man's Jersey cow offhand, without his knowledge or consent, you must not mind if his parrot repeated uncomplimentary things. Nevertheless, the red-headed snippet was not quite so meek as she might otherwise have been.
That quote about, I feel like that should be like an AVG advice thing, or like literary advice.
I've just sold my neighbor's cow, and his parrot called me a red-headed snippet. How much of the value of the cow should that remove?
Remember to not mind if his parrot repeated uncomplimentary things.
Indeed. I've come to confess something to you, Mr. Harrison, she said resolutely. It's about that Jersey cow. Bless my soul, exclaimed Mr. Harrison nervously. Has she gone and broken into my oats again? Oh, never mind. Never mind if she has. It's no difference. None at all. I was too hasty yesterday. That's a fact. Never mind if she has. Oh, if only it were that, but it's 10 times worse. I don't... Bless my soul, do you mean to say she's got into my wheat? No, not the wheat, but... It's the cabbages. She's broken into my cabbages that I was raising for exhibition. Hey? Hello, Keenergy.
Hi,
Welcome
Keenergy.
in. What is the meme emote? Emote meme?
Oh, it's just the sound bite service I use.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, if it's all over, then it's all over. It's not the cabbages, Mr. Harrison. I'll tell you everything. That is what I came for. But please don't interrupt me. It makes me so nervous. Just let me tell my story and don't say anything till I get through, and then no doubt you'll say plenty. Anne concluded, but in thought only. I won't say another word, said Mr. Harrison, and he didn't. But Ginger was not bound by any contract of silence and kept ejaculating, "Red-headed snippet!" at intervals until Anne felt quite wild. I shut my Jersey cow up in our pen yesterday. This morning I went to Carmody, and when I came back, I saw a Jersey cow in your oats. Diana and I chased her out, and you can't imagine what a hard time we had. I was so dreadfully wet and tired and vexed. And Mr. Shearer came by that very minute and offered to buy the cow. I sold her to him on the spot for $20. It was wrong of me. I should have waited and consulted with Marilla, of course. But I'm dreadfully given to doing things without thinking. Everybody who knows me will tell you that. Mr. Shearer took the cow right away on to ship her on the afternoon rain. Red-headed snippet, quoted Ginger in a tone of profound contempt. At this point, Mr. Harrison arose and, with an expression that would have struck terror into any bird but a parrot, carried Ginger's cage into an adjoining room and shut the door. Ginger shrieked, swore, and otherwise conducted himself in keeping with his reputation, but finding himself left alone, relapsed into sulky silence.
Time out for Ginger.
Exactly, putting the parrot in timeout as our opening move.
Excuse me and do go on,
said Mr. Harrison, sitting down again.
My brother the sailor never taught that bird any manners.
I went home out, and after tea I went out to the milking pen. Mr. Harrison... Anne leaned forward, clasping her hands with her old childish gesture, while her big grey eyes gazed imploringly into Mr. Harrison's embarrassed face. I found my cow still shut up in the pen. It was your cow I had sold to Mr. Shearer.
Bless my soul!
Exclaimed Mr. Harrison in blank amazement at this unlooked-for conclusion.
What a very extraordinary thing.
Oh, it isn't the least extraordinary that I should be getting myself and other people into scrapes. I'm noted for that. You might suppose I'd have grown out of it by this time. I'll be 17 next March, but it seems I haven't. Mr. Harrison, is it too much to hope that you'll forgive me? I'm afraid it's too late to get your cow back, but here is the money for her. Or you can have mine in exchange if you'd rather. She's a very good cow, and I can't express how sorry I am for it all. Do you want to switch here? Do you want me to continue until the end of the scene? How do we want to roll this?
Feel free to Full Metal Alchemist me anytime.
Okay, I think I might wrap up the scene and then we'll do it that way.
Sure.
Tut tut,
said Mr. Harrison briskly.
Don't say another word about it, miss. It's of no consequence. No consequence whatever. Accidents will happen. I'm too hasty myself sometimes, miss. Far too hasty. But I can't help speaking out what I think, and folks must take me as they find me. If that cow had been in my cabbages now, never mind. She wasn't, so it's all right. I think I'd rather have your cow in exchange since you want to be rid of her.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Harrison. I'm so glad you are not vexed. I was afraid you would be.
And I suppose you were scared to death to come here and tell me after the fuss I made yesterday, eh? But you mustn't mind me. I'm a terrible outspoken old fella, that's all. Awful apt to tell the truth, no matter if it is a bit plain.
So is Mrs. Linda, said Anne before she could prevent herself.
Ooh, Mrs. Linda, don't tell me I'm like that old gossip,
said Mr. Harrison irritably.
I'm not a bit. What have you got in that box?
A cake, said Anne archly. In her relief at Mr. Harrison's unexpected amiability, her spirits soared upward feather-light. I brought it over for you. I thought perhaps you didn't have cake very often.
I don't. That's a fact. I'm mighty fond of it, too. I'm much obliged to you. It looks good on top. I hope it's good all the way through.
It is, said Anne, gaily confident. I have made cakes in my time that were not, as Mrs. Allen would tell you, but this one is all right. I made it for the Improvement Society, but I can make another for them.
You were anti-cake.
I mean, it was liniment oil, you know? Oh, dear.
Well, I'll tell you what, miss. You must help me eat it. I'll put the kettle on and we'll have a cup of tea. How will that do?
Will you let me make the tea? Said Anne dubiously. Mr. Harrison chuckled.
I see you haven't much confidence in my ability to make tea. You're wrong. I can brew up as good a jorum of tea as you ever drank. But go ahead yourself. Fortunately, it rained last Sunday, so there's plenty of clean dishes.
Oh, man. Well, at least they have tea and cake in common.
Indeed. Anne hopped briskly up and went to work. She washed the teapot in several waters before she put the tea to steep. Then she swept the stove and set the table, bringing the dishes out of the pantry. The state of that pantry horrified Anne, but she wisely said nothing. Mr. Harrison told her where to find the bread and butter and a can of peaches. Anne adorned the table with a bouquet from the garden and shut her eyes to the stains on the tablecloth. Soon the tea was ready, and Anne found herself sitting opposite Mr. Harrison at his own table, pouring his tea for him and chatting freely to him about her school and friends and plans. She could hardly believe the evidence of her senses. Mr. Harrison had brought Ginger back, averring that the poor bird would be lonesome, and Anne, feeling she could forgive everybody and everything, offered him a walnut. But Ginger's feelings had been grievously hurt, and he rejected all overtures of friendship. He sat moodily on his perch and ruffled his feathers up until he looked like a mere ball of green and gold. Full Metal Alchemist.
Ah. Full Metal Alchemist. Why do you call him Ginger? Asked Anne, who liked appropriate names and thought Ginger accorded not at all with such gorgeous plumage. My brother the sailor named him. Maybe it had some reference to his temper. Think a lot of that bird, though. You'd be surprised if you knew how much. He has his faults, of course. That bird has cost me a good deal one way and another. Some people object to his swearing habits, but can't be broken of them. I've tried. Other people have tried. Some folks have prejudices against parrots. Silly, ain't it? I like them myself. Ginger's a lot of company to me. Nothing would induce me to give up that bird. Nothing in the world, miss. Nothing in the world, miss. Mr. Harrison flung the last sentence at Anne as explosively. What were you going to say?
Oh, I'm just laughing.
Oh, yeah. As if he suspected her of some latent design of persuading him to give Ginger up. Anne, however, was beginning to like the queer, fussy, fidgety little man, and before the meal was over, they were quite good friends. Mr. Harrison found out about the Improvement Society and was disposed to approve of it. That's right, go ahead. There's lots of room for improvement in this settlement. And in the people, too. Oh, I don't know, flashed Anne. To herself, or to her particular cronies, she might admit that there were some small imperfections easily removable in Avonlea and its inhabitants, but to hear a practical outsider like Mr. Harrison saying it was an entirely different thing. I think Avonlea's a lovely place, and the people in it are very nice, too. I guess you've got a spice of temper, commented Mr. Harrison, surveying the flushed cheeks and indignant eyes opposite him. It goes with hair like yours, I reckon. Avonlea's a pretty decent place, or I wouldn't have located here. But I suppose even you will admit that it has some faults. I like it all the better for them, said loyal Anne. I don't like places or people I don't like places or people either that haven't any faults. I think a truly perfect person would be very uninteresting. Mrs. Milton White says she never met a perfect person, but she's heard enough about one. Her husband's first wife. Don't you think it must be very uncomfortable to be married to a man whose first wife was perfect? It would be more uncomfortable to be married to the perfect wife, declared Mr. Harrison, with a sudden and inexplicable warmth. When tea was over, Anne insisted on washing the dishes, although Mr. Harrison assured her that there was more than enough in the house to do for weeks yet. He would dearly have loved to sweep the floor also, but no broom was visible, and she did not like to ask where it was for the fear there wasn't one at all. You might run across and talk to me once in a while, suggested Mr. Harrison when she was leaving. It isn't far, and folks ought to be neighborly. I'm kind of interested in that society of yours. Seems to me there'll be some fun of it. Who are you going to tackle first? We aren't going to meddle with people. It's only places we're meant to improve, said Anne in a dignified tone. She rather suspected that Mr. Harrison was making fun of the project. When she had gone, Mr. Harrison watched her from the window, a lithe, girlish shape tripping lightheartedly across the fields in the sunset afterglow. I'm a crusty, lonesome, crabbed old chap, he said aloud, but there's something about that little girl that makes me feel young again. A pleasant sensation. I'd like to have it repeated once in a while. Red-headed snippet, croaked Ginger mockingly. Mr. Harrison shook his fist at the pair. You ornery bird, you muttered. I almost wish I'd wrung your neck when my brother the sailor brought you home. Will you never be done getting me into trouble? Anne ran home blithely and recounted her adventures to Marilla, who had been not a little alarmed by her long absence and was on the point of starting out to look for her. "It's a pretty good world, after all, isn't it, Marilla?" concluded Anne happily. Mrs. Linda was complaining that the other day it wasn't such of a world. She said, whenever you looked forward to anything pleasant, you were sure to be more or less disappointed. Perhaps that is true. But there is a good side to it, too. The bad things don't always come up to your expectations either. They nearly always turn out ever so much better than you think. I looked forward to a dreadfully unpleasant experience when I went over Mr. Harrison's tonight, and instead he was quite kind, and I had almost a nice time. I think we're going to be real good friends if we make plenty of allowances for each other. And everything has turned out for the best. But all the same, Marilla, I shall certainly never again sell a cow before making sure to whom she belongs, and I do not like parrots. Alright. Seems like each of us do half the chapter.
You know, I can certainly get behind this.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I don't think a better outcome could have happened. Oh dear. Chapter 4. Different Opinions. One evening at sunset, Jane Andrews, Gilbert Blythe, and Anne Shirley were lingering by a fence in the shadow of gently swaying spruce boughs, where a wood cut known as the Birch Path joined the main road. Jane had been up to spend the afternoon with Anne, who walked part of the way home with her. At the fence they met Gilbert, and all three were now talking about the fateful morrow. For that morrow was the 1st of September, and the schools would open. Jane would go to Newbridge, Gilbert to White Sands. You both have the advantage of me. You're going to teach children who don't know you, but I have to teach my own old schoolmates, and Mrs. Linda says she's afraid that they won't respect me as they would a stranger unless I'm very cross from the first. But I don't believe a teacher should be cross. Oh, it seems to me such a responsibility. I guess we'll get on all right, said Jane comfortably. Jane was not troubled by any aspirations to be an influence for good. She meant to earn her salary fairly, please the trustees, and get her name on the school inspector's roll of honor. Further ambitions, Jane had none.
Bureaucracy.
Look, some of us are just here for a paycheck.
Yeah.
The main thing will be to keep order, and a teacher has to be a little cross to do that. If my pupils won't do as I tell them, I shall punish them. How? Give them a good whipping, of course. Oh, Jane, you wouldn't! Cried Anne, shocked. Jane, you couldn't! Indeed, I could and would if they deserved it, said Jane decidedly. I could never whip a child, said Anne with equal decision. I don't believe in it at all. Miss Stacy never whipped any of us, and she had perfect order, and Mr. Phillips was always whipping, and he had no order at all. No, if I can't get along without whipping, I shall try not to teach school. There are better ways of managing. I shall try to win my pupils' affections, and then they will want to do what I tell them. But suppose they don't, said practical Jane. I wouldn't whip them anyhow. I'm sure it wouldn't do any good. Oh, don't whip your pupils, Jane dear, no matter what they do. What do you think about it, Gilbert? Demanded Jane. Don't you think there are some children who really need a whipping now and then?
Don't you think it's a cruel, barbarous...
Don't you think it's a cruel, barbarous thing to whip any child? Any child? Exclaimed Anne, who is not
into,
Gilbert.
Some
Her
sort of
face
power
flushing
mode.
with earnestness. No, I just figured Gilbert would be answering here, and so I switched into his voice. Got to the end of it, and it's like, oh no, this is not Anne's voice. Don't you think it's a cruel, barbarous thing to whip a child? Any child? Exclaimed Anne, her face flushing with earnestness.
Well,
Said Gilbert slowly, torn between his real convictions and his wish to measure up to Anne's ideal.
there's something to be said on both sides. I don't believe in whipping children much, I think, as you say, Anne, there are better ways of managing as a rule, and that corporal punishment should be a last resort. But on the other hand, as Jane says, I believe there is an occasional child who can't be influenced in any other way, and who, in short, needs a whipping and would be improved by it. Corporal punishment as a last resort is to be my rule.
Gilbert, having tried to please both sides, succeeded, as is usually and eminently right, in pleasing neither. Jane tossed her head.
Fence-sitter.
I'll whip my pupils when they're naughty. It's the shortest and easiest way of convincing them. Anne gave Gilbert a disappointed glance. Everybody hated that. Poor Gil. I shall never whip a child, she repeated firmly. I feel sure it isn't either right or necessary. I suppose a boy sauced you back when you told him to do something? I'd keep him in after school and talk kindly and firmly to him. There is some good in every person if you can find it. It is a teacher's duty to find and develop it. That is what our school management professor at Queen's told us, you know. Do you suppose you could find any good in a child by whipping him? It's far more important to influence the children aright than it is to teach them the 3 R's, Professor Rennie says. But the inspector examines them in the 3 R's, mind you, and he won't give you a good report if they don't come up to his standard. I'd rather have my pupils love me and look back to me in years after as a real helper than be on the roll of honor, asserted Anne decidedly.
Wouldn't you punish children at all when they misbehaved?
Oh, yes, I suppose I shall have to, although I'll hate to do it. But you can keep them in at recess, or stand them on the floor, or give them lines to write. I suppose you won't punish the girls by making them sit with the boys, said Jane slyly. Gilbert and Anne looked at each other and smiled rather foolishly. Once upon a time, Anne had been made to sit with Gilbert for punishment, and sad and bitter had been the consequences thereof. Well, time will tell which is the best way, said Jane philosophically as they parted. Anne went back to Green Gables by way of Birch Path, shadowy, rustling, fern-scented, through the violet vale and past Willowmere, where dark and light kissed each other under the firs, and down through Lover's Lane, spots she and Diana had named so long ago. She walked slowly, enjoying the sweetness of wood and field in the starry summer twilight, and thinking soberly about the new duties she was about to take up on the morrow. When she reached the yard at Green Gables, Mrs. Linda's loud, decided tones floated out through the open kitchen window. Mrs. Linda has come up to give me good advice. Oh, doggone it. Why? Mrs. Linda has come up to give me good advice about tomorrow, thought Anne with a grimace. But I don't believe I'll go in. Her advice is much like pepper, I think. Excellent in small quantities, but rather scorching in her doses. I'll run over and have a chat with Mr. Harrison instead. This was not the first time Anne Shirley had run over and chatted with Mr. Harrison since the notable affair of the Jersey cow. She had been there several evenings with Mr. Harrison, and she were very good friends. She had been there several evenings, and Mr. Harrison and she were very good friends, although there were times and seasons when Anne found the outspokenness on which he prided himself rather trying. Ginger still continued to regard her with suspicion, and never failed to greet her sarcastically as "Red-headed snippet!" Mr. Harrison had tried vainly to break him of the habit by jumping excitedly up whenever he saw Anne and exclaiming, "Bless my soul, here's that pretty girl again," or something equally flattering. But Miss Ginger saw through the scheme and scorned it. Anne was never to know how many compliments Mr. Harrison paid her behind her back. He certainly never paid her any to her face. Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist. Well, I suppose you've been back in the woods laying in a supply of switches for tomorrow, was his greeting as Anne came up to the veranda steps. No, indeed, said Anne indignantly. She was an excellent target for teasing because she always took things so seriously. I shall never have a switch in my school, Mr. Harrison. Of course, I shall have to have a pointer, but I shall use it for pointing only. So, you mean to strap them instead? Well, I don't know, but you're right. Switch stings more at the time, but the strap smarts longer. That's a fact. I shall not use anything of the sort. I'm not going to whip my pupils. Bless my soul! Exclaimed Mr. Harrison in genuine astonishment. How do you lay out to keep order, then? I shall govern by affection, Mr. Harrison. It won't do, said Mr. Harrison. Won't do at all, Anne. Spare the rod and spoil the child. When I went to school, the master whipped me regular every day because he said if I wasn't in mischief, well, just then I was plotting it. Methods have changed since your school days, Mr. Harrison, but human nature hasn't. Mark my words, you'll never manage the young fry unless you keep a rod in pickle for them. The thing is impossible. Well, I'm going to try my way first, said Anne, who had a fairly strong will of her own, and was apt to cling very tenaciously to her theories. You're pretty stubborn, I reckon, was Mr. Harrison's way of putting it. Well, we'll see. Someday when you get riled up. People with hair like yours are desperate apt to get riled. You'll forget all your pretty little notions and give some of them a whaling. You're too young to be teaching anyhow. Far too young a child. Altogether, Anne went to bed that night in a rather pessimistic mood. Slept poorly, and was so pale and tragic at breakfast next morning that Marilla was alarmed and insisted on making her take a cup of scorching ginger tea. Anne sipped it patiently, although she could not imagine what good ginger tea would do. Had it been some magic brew, potent to confer age and wisdom, Anne would have swallowed a quart of it without flinching. Marilla, what if I fail? You'll hardly fail completely in one day, and there's plenty more days coming, said Marilla. The trouble with you, Anne, is that you'll expect to teach those children everything and reform all their faults right off. If you can't, you'll think you've failed. I'm going to continue with Chapter 5, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Chapter 5, A Full-Fledged Schoolma'am. When Anne reached the school that morning, for the first time in her life she had traversed the birch path, deaf and blind to its beauties. All was quiet and still. The preceding teacher had trained the children to be in their places at her arrival, and when Anne entered the schoolroom, she was confronted by prim rows of shining morning faces and bright, inquisitive eyes. She hung up her hat and faced her pupils, hoping that she did not look as frightened and foolish as she felt, and they would not perceive how she was trembling. She had sat up until nearly 12 the preceding night, composing a speech she meant to take up to her pupils upon opening the school. She had revised and improved it painstakingly, and then she had learned it off by heart. Very good speech, and had some very fine ideas in it, especially about how mutual help and earnest striving after knowledge. The only trouble was that she could not now remember a word of it. After what seemed to her a year, about 10 seconds in reality, she said faintly, "Take your testaments, please," and sank breathlessly into her chair under cover of the rustle and clatter of desk lids that followed. While the children read their verses, Anne marshaled her shaky wits into order and looked over the array of little pilgrims to the grown-up land. Most of them were, of course, quite well known to her. Her own classmates had passed out in the preceding year, but the rest had all gone to school with her, excepting the primer class and 10 newcomers to Avonlea. Anne secretly felt more interest in these 10 than in those whose possibilities were already fairly well mapped out to her. To be sure, they might be just commonplace as the rest, but on the other hand, there might be a genius among them. It was a thrilling idea. Sitting by himself at a corner desk was Anthony Pye. He had a dark, sullen little face, and was staring at Anne with hostile expression in his black eyes. Anne instantly made up her mind that she would win that boy's affection and discomfit the Pyes utterly. Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist. In the other corner, another strange boy was sitting with Artie Sloane, a jolly-looking little chap with a snub nose, freckled face, and big light blue eyes. fringed with whitish lasses, possibly the Donnell boy. And if resemblance went for anything, his sister was sitting across the aisle with Mary Bell. Anne wondered what sort of mother the child had to send her to school dressed as she was. She wore a faded pink silk dress trimmed with a great deal of cotton lace, soiled white kid slippers, and silk stockings. Her sandy hair was tortured into innumerable kinky and unnatural curls, surmounted by a flamboyant bow of pink ribbon bigger than her head. Judging from her expression, she was very well satisfied with herself. A pale little thing, with smooth ripples of fine, silky, fawn-colored hair flowing over her shoulders, must, Anne thought, be Annetta Bell, whose parents had formerly lived in the Newbridge School District, but, by reason of hauling their house 50 yards north of its old site, were now in Avonlea. 3 pallid little girls crowded into one seat were certainly Cottons, and there was no doubt that the small beauty with long brown curls and hazel eyes, who was casting coquettish looks at Jack Gills over the edge of her testament, was Prillie Rogerson, whose father had recently married a second wife and brought Prillie home from her grandmother's in Grafton. A tall, awkward girl in a black back seat who often seemed to have too many feet and hands, Anne could not place at all, but later on discovered her name was Barbara Shaw, and that she had come to live with an Avonlea aunt. She was also to find that if Barbara ever managed to walk down the aisle without falling over her own or somebody else's feet, the Avonlea scholars wrote the unusual fact up on the porch wall to commemorate it. But when Anne's eyes met those of the boy at the front desk facing her own, a queer little thrill went over her, as if she had found her genius. She knew this must be Paul Irving, and that Mrs. Rachel Lynde had been right for once when she prophesied that he would be unlike the Avonlea children. More than that, Anne realized he was unlike other children anywhere, and that there was a soul subtly akin to her own gazing at her out of the very dark blue eyes that were watching her so intently. She knew Paul was 10, but he looked no more than 8. He had the most beautiful little face she had ever seen in a child, features of exquisite delicacy and refinement framed in a halo of chestnut curls. His mouth was delicious, being full without pouting, the crimson lips just softly touching and curving into finely finished little corners that narrowly escaped being dimpled. He had a sober, grave, meditative expression, as if his spirit was much older than his body. But when Anne smiled softly at him, it vanished in a sudden, answering smile, which seemed an illumination of his whole being, as if some lamp had suddenly kindled into flame inside of him, irradiating him from top to toe. Best of all, it was involuntary, born of no external effort or motive, but simply the outflashing of a hidden personality, rare and fine and sweet. With a quick interchange of smiles, Anne and Paul were fast friends forever before a word had passed between them. The day went by like a dream. Anne could never clearly recall it afterward. It almost seemed as if it were not she who was the teaching, but someone else. She heard classes and worked sums and set copies mechanically. The children behaved quite well, only 2 cases of discipline occurred. Morley Andrews was caught giving a pair of trained crickets in the aisle. Anne stood Morley on the platform for an hour, which Morley felt much more keenly, confiscated his crickets. Anne stood Morley on the platform for an hour and, which Morley felt more keenly, confiscated his crickets. She put them in a box on the way from school, set them free in Violet Vale, but Morley believed, then and ever afterward, that she took them home and kept them for her own amusement. The other culprit was Anthony Pye, who poured the last drops of water from his slate bottle down the back of Aurelia Clay's neck. Anne kept Anthony in at recess and talked to him about what was expected of gentlemen, admonishing him that they never poured water down ladies' necks. She wanted all her boys to be gentlemen, she said, Her little lecture was quite kind and touching, but unfortunately, Anthony remained absolutely untouched. He listened to her in silence with the same sullen expression and whistled scornfully as he went out. Anne sighed, and then cheered herself up by remembering that winning the pie's affection, like building of Rome, wasn't the work of a day. In fact, it was doubtful whether some of the pies had any affections to win. But Anne hoped better things of Anthony, who looked as if he might be a rather nice boy, if one ever got behind his sullenness. When school was dismissed and the children had gone, Anne dropped wearily into her chair. Her head ached, and she felt woefully discouraged. There was no real reason for discouragement, since nothing had...
Sorry about that.
No worries. Since nothing very dreadful had occurred. But Anne was very tired and inclined to believe that she would never learn to like teaching. And how horrible it would be to be doing something you didn't like every day for, well, say 40 years. Anne was two minds whether to have her cry out then and there, or wait till she was safely in her own white room at home. Before she could decide, there was a click of heels and a silken swish on the porch floor, and Anne found herself confronted by a lady whose appearance made her recall a recent criticism of Mr. Harrison's on an overdressed female he had seen in a Charlottetown store.
She looked like a head-on collision between a fashion plate and a nightmare.
The newcomer was gorgeously arrayed in a pale blue summer silk, puffed, frilled, and shrilled wherever puff, frill, or shirring could possibly be placed. Her head was surmounted by a huge white chiffon hat, bedecked with 3 long but rather stringy ostrich feathers. A veil of pink chiffon, lavishly sprinkled with huge black dots, hung like a flounce over the hat brim for her shoulders, and floated off in 2 airy streamers behind her. She wore all the jewelry that could be crowded on one small woman, and a very strong odor of perfume attended her. "I am Miss Donnell, Mrs. H.B. Donnell," announced this vision, "and I have come in to see you about something Clarice Almiras told me when she came home from dinner today. It annoyed me excessively." "I'm sorry," faltered Anne, vainly trying to recollect any incident of the morning connected with the Donnell children. "Clarice Almira told me that you pronounced our name Donnell. Now, Miss Shirley, the correct pronunciation of our name is Donnell, accent on the last syllable. I hope you'll remember this in the future." "I'll try to," gasped Anne, choking back a wild desire to laugh. "I know by experience that it's very unpleasant to have one's name spelled wrong, and I suppose it must be even worse to have it pronounced wrong." "Certainly it is. And Clarice Almira also informed me that you call my son Jacob." "He told me his name was Jacob." "I might have expected that," said Mrs. H.B. Donnell, in a tone which implied that gratitude in children was not to be looked for in this degenerate age. "That boy has such plebeian taste, Miss Shirley. But when he was born, I wanted to call him St. Clair. It sounds so aristocratic, doesn't it? But his father insisted he should be called Jacob after his uncle. I yielded because Uncle Jacob was a rich old bachelor. And what do you think, Miss Shirley? When our innocent boy was 5 years old, Uncle Jacob actually went and got married, and now he has 3 boys of his own. Did you ever hear of such ingratitude? The moment the invitation to the wedding, for he had the impertinence to send us an invitation, Miss Shirley, came to the house, I said, 'No more Jacobs for me, thank you.' From that day forward, I called my son St. Clair, and St. Clair I am determined he shall be called. His father obstinately continues to call him Jacob, and the boy himself has a perfectly unaccountable preference for the vulgar name. But St. Clair he is, and St. Clair he shall remain. You will kindly remember this, Miss Shirley, will you not? Thank you. I told Clarice Almira that I was sure it was only a misunderstanding, and a word would set you right. Donnell, accent on the last syllable, and St. Clair. On no account Jacob. You'll remember? Thank you." When Mrs. H.B. Donnell had skimmed away, Anne locked the school door and went home. At the foot of the hill, she found Paul Irving by the birch path. He held out to her a cluster of the dainty little wild orchids, which Avonlea children called rice lilies. "Please, teacher, I found these in Mr. Wright's field," he said shyly, "and I came back to give them to you because I thought you were the kind of lady who would like them, and because—" He lifted his big, beautiful eyes. "I like you, teacher." "You darling," said Anne, taking the fragrant spikes. As if Paul's words had been a spell of magic, discouragement and weariness passed from her spirit, and hope upwelled in her heart, like a dancing fountain. She went through the birch path light-footedly, attended by the sweetness of her orchids as a benediction. "Well, how did you get along?" Marilla wanted to know. "Ask me that in a month later, and I may be able to tell you. And I can't now. I don't know for myself. I'm too near it. My thoughts feel as if they all had been stirred up and my thoughts feel as if they had been all stirred up until they were thick and muddy. The only thing I feel really sure of having accomplished today is that I taught Cliff Wright that A is A. He never knew it before. Isn't it something to have started a soul along a path that may end in Shakespeare and Paradise Lost?" Mrs. Lynde came up later with one more encouragement. Mrs. Lynde came up later on with more encouragement. That good lady had waylaid the school children at her gate and demanded of them how they liked their new teacher. "And every one of them said they liked you splendid, Anne, except Anthony Pye. I must admit he didn't. He said you weren't any good, just like all girl teachers. There's the pie laven for you, but never mind." "I'm not going to mind," said Anne quietly, "and I'm going to make Anthony Pye like me yet. Patience and kindness will surely win him." "Well, you can never tell about a pie," said Mrs. Rachel cautiously. "They go by contraries, like dreams, often as not. As for that Donnell woman, she'll get no Donnelling from me, I can assure you. The name is Donnell, and always has been. That woman is crazy, that's what. She has a pug dog she calls Queenie, and it has its meals at the table along with the family, eating off a china plate. I'd be afraid of a judgment if I was her. Thomas says Donnell himself is a sensible, hard-working man, but he hadn't much gumption when he picked out a wife, that's what."
Sounds like she came from Beverly Hills.
Is that not where we want to be?
Yeah, well, in Mrs. Donnell's eyes. All right,
Rolling
let's
like a
do
celebrity.
one more chapter.
We can do one more chapter, sure.
All right, I'll pick it up from here.
Alrighty.
6. All sorts of conditions of men and women. A September day on Prince Edward Island hills. Crisp wind blowing up over the sand dunes from the sea. A long red road, winding through the fields and woods, now looping itself about a corner of thick-set spruces, now threading a plantation of young maples with great feathery sheets of ferns beneath them, now dipping down into a hollow where a brook flashed out of the woods and into them again, now basking in open sunshine between ribbons of goldenrod and smoke-blue asters, air athrill with the pipings of myriads of crickets, those glad little pensioners, the summer hills. A plump brown pony ambling along the road, 2 girls behind him, full to the lips with the simple, priceless joy of youth and life. "Oh, this is a day left over from Eden, isn't it, Diana?" said Anne. Oh, and Anne sighed for sheer happiness. The air has magic in it. Look at the purple cup. Purple in the cup of the Harvest Valley, Diana. And oh, do smell the dying fir. It's coming up from that little sunny hollow where Mr. Eben Wright has been cutting fence poles. Bliss is it on such a day to be alive, but to smell dying fir is very heaven. That's 2/3 Wordsworth and 1/3 Anne Shirley. Doesn't seem possible that there should be dying fir in heaven, doesn't it? And yet it doesn't seem to me that heaven would be quite perfect if you couldn't get a whiff of dead fir as you went through its woods. Perhaps we'll have the odor there without the death. Yes, I think that will be the way. The delicious aroma must be the souls of the firs. And of course it will be just souls in heaven. Trees haven't souls, said practical Diana, but the smell of dead fir is certainly lovely. I'm gonna make a cushion and fill it with fir needles. You better make one too, Anne. I think I shall, and use it for my naps. I'd be certain to dream I was a dryad or a wood nymph then. But just this minute I'm well content to be Anne Shirley, Avonlea schoolma'am, driving over a road like this on such a sweet, friendly day. It's such a lovely day, but we have anything but a lovely task before us, cried Diana. Why on earth did you offer to canvass this road, Anne? Almost all the cranks in Avonlea live along it, and we'll probably be treated as if we were begging for ourselves. The very worst road of all. That is why I chose it. Of course, Gilbert and Fred would have taken this road if we had asked them, but you see, Diana, I feel myself responsible for the AVIS, since I was the first to suggest it, and it seems to me that I ought to do the most disagreeable things. I'm sorry, on your account, but you needn't say a word at the cranky places. I'll do all the talking. Mrs. Linda said I would say I was well able to. Mrs. Linda doesn't know whether to approve of our enterprise or not. She inclines to, when she remembers that Mr. and Mrs. Allen are in favor of it, but the fact that village improvement societies first originated in the States is a count against it, so she is halting between two opinions and only success will justify us in Mrs. Linda's eyes. Phila is going to write a paper for our next improvement meeting, and I expect it will be good, for her aunt is such a clever writer, and no doubt it runs in the family. She'll never forget the thrill it gave me when I found out that Mrs. Charlotte E. Morgan was Priscilla's aunt. It seemed so wonderful that I was a friend of the girl whose aunt wrote Edgewood Days in the Rosebud Garden. Where does Mrs. Morgan live? In Toronto, and Priscilla says she is coming into the island for a visit next summer, and if it is possible, Priscilla is going to arrange to have us meet her. That seems almost too good to be true, but it's something pleasant to imagine after you go to bed. The Avonlea Village Improvement Society was an organized fact. Gilbert Blythe was president, Fred Wright vice president, Anne Shirley secretary, and Diana Barry treasurer. The improvers, as they were promptly christened, were to meet once a fortnight at the homes of members. It was admitted that they could not expect to effect many improvements so late in the season, but they meant to plan the next summer's campaign, collect and discuss ideas, write and read papers, and as Anne said, educate the public sentiment generally. There was some disapproval, of course, and which the improvers felt much more keenly. A good deal of ridicule. Mr. Elijah Wright was reported to have said that a more appropriate name for the organization would be the Courting Club. Is this Hiram?
I would just call it Mrs. Hiram Sloane.
Mrs. Hiram Sloane declared the improvers meant to plow up. He had heard the improvers meant to plow up all the roadsides and set them out with geraniums. Mr. Levi Bolter warned his neighbors that the improvers would insist that everybody pull down his house and rebuild it after plans approved by the society. Mr. James Spencer sent them word that he wished they would kindly shovel down the church hill, and Eben Wright told Anne that he wished the improvers could induce old Josiah Sloane to keep his whiskers trimmed. Mr. Lawrence Bell said he would whitewash his barns if nothing else would please them, but he would not hang lace curtains in the cow stable windows. Mr. Major Spencer asked Clifton Sloane, an improver who drove the milk to the Carmody cheese factory, if it was true that everybody would have to have his milk stand hand-painted next summer and keep an embroidered centerpiece on it. In spite of, or perhaps human nature being what it is because of, this, the society went gamely to work at the only improvement they could hope to bring about that. At the second meeting in the Berry Parlor, Oliver Sloane moved that they should start a subscription to reshingle and paint the hall. Julia Bell seconded it. an uneasy feeling that she was doing something not exactly ladylike. Gilbert put the motion. It was carried unanimously, and Brayley recorded it in her minutes. The next thing was to appoint a committee, and Gertie Pye, determined not to let Julia Bell carry off all the laurels, boldly moved that Miss Jane Andrews be chairman of said committee. This motion being also duly seconded and carried, Jane returned the compliment by appointing Gertie on the committee, along with Gilbert and Diana and Fred Wright. The committee chose their routes in private conclave. Anne and Diana were told off for the New Bridge Road, Gilbert and Fred for the White Sands Road, Jane and Gertie for the Carmen. "'Cause," explained Gilbert to Anne as they walked home together through the haunted wood, "the Pyes all live along that road, and they won't give a cent unless one of themselves canvasses it." The next Saturday, Anne and Diana started out, drove to the end of the road, and canvassed homeward, calling first on the Andrew girls. "If Catherine is alone, we may get something," said Diana, "but if Eliza's there, we won't." Eliza was there, very much so, and looked even grimmer than usual. Miss Eliza was one of those people who give you the impression that life is indeed a vale of tears, and that a smile to speak a laugh is a waste of nervous energy, truly reprehensible. The Andrew girls had been girls for 50-odd years, and seemed likely to remain girls to the end of their earthly pilgrimage. Oh, someone, I guess, got banned automatically from my chat. Thank you, Saribot. The Andrew girls had been girls for 50-odd years, and seemed likely to remain girls to the end of their earthly pilgrimage. Catherine, it was said, had not entirely given up hope, but Eliza, who was born a pessimist, had never any. They lived in a little brown house built in a sunny corner, scooped out of Mark Andrews' beech woods. Eliza complained that it was terribly hot in the summer, but Catherine was wont to say it was lovely and warm in winter. Eliza was sewing patchwork not because it was needed, but simply as a protest against the frivolous lace Catherine was crocheting. Eliza listened with a frown, and Catherine with a smile, as the girls explained their errand, to be sure. Whenever Catherine caught Eliza's eye, she discarded the smile in guilty confusion, but it crept back the next moment. Drink of water, Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist. "If I had money to waste," said Eliza grimly, "I'd burn it up and have the fun of seeing a blaze maybe, but I wouldn't give it to that hall, not a cent. It's no benefit to the settlement, just a place for young folks to meet and carry on when they's better be home in their beds." "Oh, Eliza, young folks must have some amusement," protested Catherine. "I don't see the necessity. We didn't gad about to halls and places when we were young, Catherine Andrews. This world is getting worse every day." "I think it's getting better," said Catherine firmly. "You think!" Miss Eliza's voice expressed the utmost contempt. "It doesn't signify what you think, Catherine Andrews. Facts is facts." "Well, I always like to look on the bright side, Eliza." "There isn't any bright side." "Oh, there is, indeed," cried Anne, who couldn't endure such heresy in silence. "Why, there are ever so many bright sides, Miss Andrews. It's really a beautiful world." "You won't have such a high opinion of it when you've lived as long in it as I have," retorted Miss Eliza sourly. "And you won't be so... and you won't be so enthusiastic about improving it either. How is your mother, Diana? Dear me, but she has failed of late. She looks terrible run down. And how long is it before Marilla expects to be stone blind, Anne?" "The doctors think her eyes will not get any worse if she is careful," faltered Anne. Eliza shook her head.
"It's a beautiful world we live in, a sweet romantic place."
I don't know this song. I'm gonna need a link to this later, Satil.
You haven't heard Devo?
I have not heard this one, no.
Alright. I meant to give you a link to something else. Oh yeah, the mushrooms who play instruments. Yeah.
Well, I suppose I'll get my links later.
Yeah.
Doctors always talk like that just to keep people cheered up. I wouldn't have much hope if I was her. It's best to be prepared for the worst. But oughtn't we be prepared for the best, too? It's just as likely to happen as the worst. Not in my experience, and I've 57 years set against your 16, retorted Eliza. Going, are you? Well, I hope this new society of yours will be able to keep Avonlea from running any further downhill, but I haven't much hope of it. Anne and Diana got themselves thankfully out and drove away as fast as the fat pony would go. As they rounded the curve below the beech wood, a plump figure came speeding over Mr. Andrews' pasture, waving to them excitedly. It was Catherine Andrews, and she was so out of breath that she could hardly speak, but she thrust a couple of quarters into Anne's hand. "That's my contribution to the painting hall," she gasped. "I'd like to give you $1, but I don't dare take more from my egg money for Eliza. Would find out if I did. I'm real interested in your society, and I believe you're going to do a lot of good. I'm an optimist. I have to be, living with Eliza. I must hurry back before she misses me. She thinks I'm feeding the hens. I hope you have good luck canvassing, and don't be cast down over what Eliza said. The world is getting better. It certainly is." The next house was Daniel Blair's. "Now, it all depends on whether his wife is home or not," said Diana as they jolted along a deep-rutted lane. "If she is, we won't get a cent. Everyone says Dan Blair doesn't dare have his hair cut without asking her permission, and it's certain she's very close, to state it moderately. She says she has just before he's generous. She said she has to be just before she's generous. But Mrs. Linda says she's so much before that generosity never catches up with her at all." Anne related their experience at the Blair place to Marilla that evening. "We tied the horse and then rapped at the kitchen door. Nobody came, but the door was open and we could hear somebody in the pantry going on dreadfully. We couldn't make out the words, but Diana says she knows they were swearing by the sound of them. I can't believe that of Mr. Blair, for he always is so quiet and meek. But at least he had great provocation, for Marilla, when that poor man came to the door, red as a beet with perspiration streaming down his face, he had on one of his wife's big gingham aprons."
I can't get this darn thing off, for the strings are tied in a hard knot and I can't bust 'em, so you'll have to excuse me, ladies."
We begged him not to mention it and went in and sat down. Mr. Blair sat down too. He twisted the apron around to his back and rolled it up, but he did look so ashamed and worried that I felt sorry for him, and Diana said she feared we had called at an inconvenient time.
"Oh, not at all,"
said Mr. Blair to a smile.
Oh, trying to smile. Sorry. My page turns. I try to strategically time my page turns for the delay.
Yep, and it flips between pages when you do that. Like, there's an additional page it tends to flip, so I'm like, oh, my eyes. You know he is always very polite.
"I'm a little busy, getting ready to bake a cake, as it were. My wife got a telegram today that her sister from Montreal is coming tonight, and she's gone to the train to meet her and left orders for me to make a cake for tea. She's read out the recipe and told me what to do, but I've clean forgot half the directions already, and it says flavor according to taste. What does that mean? How can you tell? And what if my taste doesn't happen to be other people's taste? Would a tablespoon of vanilla be enough for a small layer cake?"
I felt sorrier than ever for the poor man. He didn't seem to be in his proper sphere at all. I had heard of henpecked husbands, and now I felt that I saw one. It was on my lips to say, "Mr. Blair, if you'll give us a subscription to the hall, I'll mix up your cake for you." I suddenly thought it wouldn't be neighborly to drive too sharp a bargain with a fellow creature in distress, so I offered to mix the cake for him without any conditions at all. He just jumped at my offer. He said he'd been used to making his own bread before he was married, but he feared cake was beyond him, and yet he hated to disappoint his wife. He got me another apron, and Diana beat the eggs, and I mixed the cake. Mr. Blair ran about and got us the materials. He had forgotten all about his apron when he ran. It streamed out behind him, and Diana said she thought she would die to see it. He said he could bake the cake all right. He was used to that. And then he asked us for our list, and he put down $4. So you see, we were rewarded. But even if he hadn't given a cent, I'd always feel that we had done a truly Christian act in helping him. Theodore White's was the next stopping place. Neither Anne nor Diana had ever been there before, and they had only a very slight acquaintance with Mrs. Theodore, who was not given to hospitality. Should they go to the back or front door? While they held a whispered consultation, Mrs. Theodore appeared at the front door with an armful of newspapers. Deliberately, she laid them down one by one on the porch floor and the porch steps, then down the path to the very feet of the mystified callers. "Will you please wipe your feet carefully on the grass and then walk on these papers?" she asked anxiously. "I've just swept the house all over and I can't have any more dust tracked in. The path's been real muddy since the rain yesterday." "Don't you dare laugh," warned Anne in a whisper as they marched along the newspapers. "And I implore you, Diana, not to look at me no matter what she says, or I shall not be able to keep a sober face." Papers extended across the hall and into a prim, fleckless parlor. Anne and Diana sat down gingerly on the nearest chairs and explained their errand. Mrs. White heard them politely, interrupting only twice, once to chase an adventurous fly, and once to pick up a tiny wisp of grass that had fallen on the carpet from Anne's dress. Anne felt wretchedly guilty, but Mrs. White subscribed $2 and paid the money down to prevent us from having to go back for it, Diana said when they got away. Mrs. White had the newspapers gathered up before they had their horse untied, and as they drove out of the yard, they saw her busily wielding a broom in the hall. "I've always heard that Mrs. Theodore White was the neatest woman alive, and I'll believe it after this," said Diana, giving way to her suppressed laughter as soon as it was safe. "I am glad she has no children. It would be dreadfully beyond words for them if she had," said Anne solemnly. At the Spencers, Mrs. Isabella Spencer made them miserable by saying something ill-natured about everyone in Avonlea. Mr. Thomas Bolter refused to give anything because the hall, when it had been built 20 years before, hadn't been built on the site he recommended. Mrs. Esther Bell, who was the picture of health, took half an hour to detail all her aches and pains, and sadly put down 50 cents because she wouldn't be there that time next year to do it. No, she would be in her grave. Their worst reception, however, was at Simon Fletcher's. When they drove into the yard, they saw two faces peering at them through the porch window. But although they rapped and waited patiently and persistently, nobody came to the door. Two decidedly ruffled and indignant girls drove away from Simon Fletcher's. Even Anne admitted she was beginning to feel discouraged. But the tide turned after that. Several Sloane homesteads came next, where they got liberal subscriptions, and from that to the end they fared well with only an occasional snub. Their last place of call was at Robert Dixon's by the Pond Bridge. They stayed to tea here, although they were very nearly home, rather than risk offending Mrs. Dixon, who had the reputation of being a very touchy woman. While they were there, old Mrs. James White called in. Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist. "I've just been down to Lorenzo's," she announced. "He's the proudest man in Avonlea this minute. What do you think? There's a brand new boy there, and after 7 girls, that's quite an event, I can tell you." Anne pricked up her ears, and when they drove away, she said, "I'm going straight to Lorenzo White's." "But he lives on the White Sands Road, and it's quite a distance out of our way," protested Diana. "Gilbert and Fred will canvass him. They're not going around until next Saturday, and it will be too late by then," said Anne firmly. "The novelty will be worn off. Lorenzo White is dreadfully mean, but he will subscribe to anything just now. You mustn't let such a golden opportunity slip, Diana." The result justified Anne's foresight. Mr. White met them in the yard, and beaming like the sun on an Easter day. When Anne asked for a subscription, he agreed enthusiastically. Certain. Just put me down for $1 more than the highest subscription you got. That will be $5. Mr. Daniel Blair put down 4, said Anne, half afraid, but Lorenzo did not flinch. 5 it is. And here's the money on the spot. Now I want you to come into the house. There's something in there worth seeing. Something very few people have seen as yet. Just come in and pass your opinion. What will we say if the baby isn't pretty? Whispered Diana in trepidation as they followed the excited Lorenzo into the household. Oh, there certainly will be something else nice to say about it, said Anne easily. There always is about a baby. The baby was pretty, however, and Mr. White felt that he got his $5 worth of the girl's honest delight over the plump little newcomer. But that was the first, last, and only time that Lorenzo White ever subscribed to anything. Anne, tired as she was, made one more effort for the public wheel that night, flipping over the fields to interview Mr. Harrison, who was, as usual, smoking his pipe on the veranda with Ginger beside him. Strictly speaking, he was on the Carmody Road, but Jane and Gertie, who were not acquainted with him, save by doubtful report, had nervously begged Anne to come. Mr. Harrison, however, flatly refused to subscribe a cent, and all Anne's wiles were in vain. But I thought you approved of our society, Mr. Harrison? He mourned. So I do. My approval doesn't go as deep as my pocket. A few more experiences such as I have had today would make me as much of a pessimist as Mrs. Eliza Andrews, Anne told her reflection in the East Gable mirror. So it is, Chapter 7, and the end of the stream for me. Gotta go get some
Thank
ding
you all so much for joining in. I hope you have a good dinner, Satio. Lovely to see everybody.
Let's see if I'll find a raid target tonight. Let's see here. Let's see here. Loading.
Well, I have a target-rich environment if you need any suggestions.
Okay. Let you know in just a moment. Well, Carter's playing Resident Evil 3 Remake, but I don't want horror this moment for any dear viewers chiming in here. So give me a something. Give me a target.
Well, I do have somebody who's doing reading and editing stories that are being submitted by the audience.
Sure.
So audience writing submissions. Let me toss that to you here in the side chat.
Okay, Cryptid Roots is our raid target. We have no particular raid message, but wish them well. And
Indeed.
tell them to have fun. I'm gonna raid and run and get that food.
Sounds like a plan. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you all next time.
Alright. See ya. Alright. Raiding in.